All right, let's dive straight into this explainer. Look, if you've been paying any attention to the market lately, you already know the headlines are absolutely dominated by Nvidia's staggering valuation. But today, we're looking way past those sheer numbers. We're going to unpack exactly how Nvidia is sustaining this massive momentum by officially turning the global chip war into a true multi-front campaign. Basically, we're exploring how a company famous for graphics cards is actively rewriting the hardware blueprints for everything: consumer devices, corporate data centers, and even physical automation. To get there, here's our battle map. We'll be hitting 1. Sustaining momentum. 2. Breaking the PC duopoly. 3. Upgrading the data center. 4. Brains for commercial robotics. 5. The silicon shockwave. And wrapping up with 6. Navigating the hardware shift. Let's get into it. Section 1. Sustaining Nvidia's massive momentum. So here's the billion-dollar question. Literally, how do you keep the engine running when you're sitting at an all-time high? Well, Nvidia answered with an absolutely astonishing $81.62 billion in revenue, completely obliterating Wall Street estimates. To put that into perspective for a second, that single quarter of revenue is higher than the annual GDP of many entire countries. It's wild. But while the financial press was totally mesmerized by that top-line number, corporate strategists were asking a different question. What exactly comes next? And Nvidia's answer at Computex 2026 was loud and clear: decentralize computing and push everywhere at once. Moving right along to Section 2, breaking the PC duopoly. This is Nvidia's very first tactical front. It's an asymmetric attack on the 40-year x86 dominance held by Intel and AMD. Slated for a fall 2026 rollout across premium Windows hardware, Nvidia is introducing the RTX Spark. So what is this? It's a custom ARM-based architecture co-designed with MediaTek. By mashing up a custom CPU with a Blackwell RTX GPU and a whopping 128 gigabytes of unified memory, they're delivering 1 petaflop of local inference straight to your laptop. And unlike previous Windows on ARM attempts that, let's face it, really struggled to get developers on board, Nvidia is walking into this already holding the keys to the software runtime. Heavyweights like Adobe, they've already rebuilt their rendering engines specifically to optimize for this exact chip. It's a real game changer. And that brings us to a massive paradigm shift. We're talking about totally moving away from 40 years of clicking apps and typing. Instead, we're entering a new era where we displace the traditional mouse and keyboard with highly responsive, always-on, local AI agents that literally do the work for you. Think about it. We're talking about running 120 billion parameter models completely offline. That is huge. Nvidia's CEO, Jensen Huang, really hit the nail on the head at Computex when he said, for the last 40 years, it's been an era of clicking apps and typing. Now it's an era where you ask the PC and the PC does the work. But the big takeaway for us here, this shift is entirely designed to trigger a massive, high-margin hardware refresh cycle. Because if your local machine can reason and execute workflows instantly, and most importantly, privately, well, that enterprise upgrade cycle goes from being a luxury to practically mandatory. Section 3. Upgrading the data center. Now, this is what really caught my attention. It's how Nvidia is aggressively widening its traditional moat. They aren't just looking outward to laptops and the edge. They're digging way deeper into the core data center. Enter the new Vera CPU architecture. This thing is built specifically for intensive reinforcement learning and agentic workflows. It's already in full production, and it's going straight after a massive new $200 billion market. Historically, right, enterprises associated Nvidia exclusively with GPUs. Well, the Vera CPU totally rewrites that narrative, planting Nvidia's flag directly in the traditional processor market. Just look at the elite pioneers who are already testing out Vera. You've got OpenAI, Anthropic, and SpaceX evaluating this exact architecture to scale up their next-generation autonomous models. Look, when names like that are adopting your foundational silicon for their most advanced, resource-heavy workflows, yeah, you know for sure you've hit a highly specific, extremely lucrative lure in the market. Which leads us to Section 4, Brains for Commercial Robotics. All right, here is where AI literally gets legs. What we're looking at is Nvidia packaging its very first commercial robotics system. They're pairing a nearly 6-foot humanoid robot from Unitree with their own Jetson Thor edge compute hardware. The edge compute is pushing an incredible 2,070 T-flops of local generative reasoning running proprietary Isaac GR00 foundation models. What they're doing here is essentially selling a completely drop-in brain for commercial automation, totally ready for real-world physical environments. And to make sure this becomes the institutional software standard, Nvidia launched what they're calling the Cosmos Coalition. Basically, they're distributing these incredibly advanced developer packages to elite institutions, like Stanford, to secure early lock-in for industrial automation. It's brilliant, really. They are making sure the next generation of robotics engineers is trained natively on Nvidia's platform before the competition even shows up to the starting line.
Section 5, the Silicon Shockwave.
As you might expect, the immediate fallout from this multi-front pivot triggered a massive domino effect across the capital markets. The shockwave right after Computex was instant. Nvidia's stock surged. Peripheral memory giants like Samsung and SK Hynix were absolutely celebrating, with up to a 7% bump. And that's entirely driven by the massive amount of low-power DRAM you need for these new on-device AI architectures. But on the flip side, incumbents like Intel, AMD, and Qualcomm suffered massive pre-market sell-offs. Qualcomm plummeted up to 8.6%. The market literally priced in this new threat overnight. But hey, the old guard isn't just rolling over and giving up. Intel fired right back with its Xeon 6 Plus processors, built on their new 18A technology, alongside new Angenic AI GPUs codenamed Crescent Island. They are leaning really heavily into their massive scale and their deeply entrenched enterprise customer base as a defense mechanism. So make no mistake, this chip war is far from a one-sided affair. Finally, Section 6, navigating the hardware shift. So what does this whole shebang actually mean for corporate strategists who are just trying to navigate this crazy landscape? Well, first off, it structurally counters that famous hyperscaler capex cliff bear thesis. The worry that growth would just vanish once cloud build-out slowed down. By expanding into CPUs, premium edge hardware, and industrial robotics, Nvidia is proving they absolutely aren't just a flash in the pan that depends on a few cloud giants buying GPUs. They are fundamentally diversifying their entire revenue mix. Competitors aren't just fighting a graphics card maker anymore. They are battling an absolute infrastructure titan. Whether we're talking about the laptop sitting on a developer's desk, the CPU inside a massive server rack, or a humanoid robot walking across a factory floor, Nvidia is laying down a foundational footprint everywhere. They are rewriting the hardware blueprints from the ground up for both consumer devices and physical corporate automation. The hardware shift is officially here, and just sitting on the sidelines? That is no longer a viable strategy. As these enterprise-grade local inference platforms arrive this fall to protect proprietary data, here is the vital question your organization has to answer. Will your IT leadership begin budgeting for premium ARM-based laptops, or are you going to remain anchored to traditional x86 cloud architectures? Think hard about how this pivot impacts your long-term roadmap. Thanks for joining me for this explainer, and I'll catch you in the next one.